You're listening to The Weather Junkies.
Oh boy. Large wedge tornado coming up into Tuscaloosa. A winter storm warning is in effect for our area.
So we can expect at least another 2 to 4 inches overnight. Then that snow's
The National Weather Service in Huntsville has issued a tornado warning for northwestern Maine.
14 to 22 inches of snow!
Good Thursday evening. Thank you for joining us on the Weather Junkies. I'm Tyler Jankowski, joining the show from the Champlain Valley alongside Dakota Smith, who is logged in from Colorado. Dakota.
Good evening, everyone. Hey, Tyler. Thanks for joining us tonight. It's a beautiful day in Colorado. We're back into that nice weather pattern here. I think we were in the 70s today, sunny skies, snow on Friday, right after last week's show. And I don't know, we got about 4 inches. 4 inches probably fell, but there was really only like a slushy 2 on the ground, and it melted the same day it fell. The mountains got crushed, though. I went for a hike just about 7,000 feet, and they're like 6 inches on the ground. Even higher, they got upwards of a foot, 1,000 feet, 10,000 feet. But we're back in the nice weather now, and it's going to be a warm weekend. We're getting into the 80s tomorrow and Saturday, so looking forward to that, doing some hiking this weekend. Tyler, how's the weather in Plattsburgh?
It has been, well, it was nice, and then that sort of ended. We have this upper level low that's moving overhead. So for the next 6, maybe 7 days, we have a chance of showers, and it's below average. But we had some 80-degree weather recently, and the lawns have been mowed about once. Sort of interesting. I went to Connecticut on my weekend, and it looked like it was a very similar progression of spring, perhaps even a little bit behind. The grass was not quite ready to mow in my part of Connecticut. So it just goes to show you how much elevation makes a difference. I know everyone thinks of Vermont or the Adirondacks and thinks it's a lot tougher than Connecticut, but the Champlain Valley at least is pretty well along in spring. So just a pretty unique observation. And
Nice. Yeah.
we finished the month of April second warmest. It was so darn close to first warmest.
It was 20th warmest out here, so not really that big of a deal, about average. So, Tyler, you want to give our guest a quick introduction here?
Yes, our guest tonight is Michael Spagnolo. He is a meteorologist, has a degree from Penn State, but he is also interested and works in emergency management. So we're planning on having a pretty unique conversation on meteorology and emergency management, one of the growing areas, one of the more modern parts of meteorology that are out there nowadays. So Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you, guys. Good evening, everyone. Pleasure to be here.
I think we'll get into a more in-depth biographical sketch here in a little bit, but we want to get into our trending in the Weatherverse segment, and feel free to chime in if you want to. Our first message comes from a Twitter account from JP Kolb, a loyal listener of the Weather Junkies. He says the real weather story out west is hot, hot, hot. We hit 90 plus in San Jose today, May 3rd. So it's hot out there. A Western perspective. We don't have much of that on the show.
No, it's nice to see JP's tweets. Yeah, and he's always telling us what the weather is out there. So JP, keep sending them our way. Really appreciate it. You can follow him on Twitter at WXJP2NYY. He's not listening tonight. He's actually umpiring. He's a baseball umpire. So hopefully he'll listen to this after it's posted and hear his shout out. Our next tweet here comes from National Weather Service in Burlington, Tyler, your neck of the woods. And their tweet says, correction to a previous tweet, St. Johnsbury, Vermont tied its warmest April low yesterday, April 28th, with 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Previous was 60 on 4/20/1941. Tyler, they're quoting you here. Did they like tweet something that was false before this, or what
something
happened?
that wasn't quite right, but my tweet that they quoted was for Burlington. Burlington is the climate site here in this neck of the woods. And at Burlington International, we set a new high record low at 64. So I like to say morning, even though lows don't always occur in the morning. But basically, the warmest morning on record in April.
Yeah.
64 degrees in Burlington, and the records go back to 1884. So that's a pretty impressive record. And it seems to me like a lot of our records are coming with the overnight, the lows. Temperatures just don't fall as much. But
what was the high that day? Do you remember?
It may have been 80. I know we were 80 around those days. But yeah, and it just snuck up on us. I mean, I you know what actually tipped me off? Matt Lanza, who we've had on this show, he tweeted Houston or something, somewhere down in Texas had a record high low. And I thought to myself, oh, it's been so warm here. I bet we also set something like that. And that's what tipped me off. It's amazing how that sort of stuff works. But
yeah,
a little shout out to him.
Thank you, Matt. We'll move on here to our next tweet. It's from another former guest of the show, David R. Coyle, Dr. Dave Coyle on Twitter. He tweets, "Do you know both weather and climate impact forest health? Join us in 2 weeks to learn how and why." And he put a link to a webinar. You can find that at southernforesthealth.net/webinars. We had him on the show, gosh, I don't know, last year sometime. And he talked about, or maybe it was this year, he talked about insects and how weather impacts kind of their population distribution and how that impacts forest health. And it was a really awesome show. Very different because he was from Georgia, and it's fun to get a kind of a more of a southern feel to the show because Tyler and I are not there. Tyler's in the Northeast, I'm out west. So check that webinar out if you have a chance. We're gonna have on some insect people next week, actually, from the Bugs and Stuff podcast. So as well. Our next tweet here comes from RadarScope, at RadarScope. In case you missed it, an open letter from RadarScope creators regarding today's release. Tyler, it looks like they created a new tier for their app. You think you're going to get it, and what does it include here?
No, I'm not getting tier 2. It sounds like a fabulous product, but for what I use RadarScope for, it doesn't have the right price range. So tier 2 is an extension of the RadarScope Professional app, and that provides a 30-day radar archive. Not exactly sure if it has all of the parameters, all the dual pol and everything like that. I bet it does. But a 30-day archive. It has rotation tracks. I wonder if that's related to Matt Mihalik's research that we were talking to him about. Anyways,
yeah.
It also has hail contours, and it's cross-platform, which is huge. I wish they'd bring that to the tier 1. Basically, if you have an iPhone and and I know I'm not talking to iPhone users on either end of this conversation, too bad. If you have an iPhone and you have an iMac and you want to buy RadarScope on your Mac, you have to pay separately because they always claimed that it was a separate app store or something. Well, somehow they got their act together, and in tier 2, you pay once and you could use it on all of your devices.
That's nice.
Now it is $100 per year, $15 a month. So I wouldn't rule out trying it for 1 month, but honestly, tier 1 is very, very good. It is a tremendous app, and I get everything I need out of that tier 1 professional subscription for $10 a year. Michael,
do you think this is something that you might use in your job or just for yourself?
I use tier 1, and I got it both on my phones, work and personal, and they're both Android, so I only pay once for it. And I can get the archive when you look that stuff up on the computer. So I don't plan on it. Like Tyler said, I might check it out a month just to see kind of how the hail contours and rotation tracks look and work, and potentially check that out. But I think I'll be sticking with tier 1. It is a bit pricey.
The interesting thing that I saw from Radar Scope was that they were targeting, among many groups, insurance folks. So I think that's sort of brilliant. You know, their app is very user friendly, and they're providing more data now. Maybe meteorologists aren't going to pay for it because we know how to access and view it, but for the end users, those that are not meteorologists, perhaps those people will buy it. Those that use it for business.
Yeah, we'll see how they do. I don't see many weather weenies picking it up for $100 a year. I guess unless you're a hardcore chaser. Maybe if you chase for.
Yeah, perhaps. Our next tweet is a tweet from Marshall Moss, and he says, "Great time playing PSU meteorology this PM. Penn State with their first victory in a softball game that's held each year between Penn State and AccuWeather. It's in its 4th year. He calls it the Accu Cup 1911. And the picture shows the celebration. I wanted to include this tweet because that is a tremendous win for Penn State. I know I was part of the inaugural game. I guess it was several years ago now. And we lost. We were out of shape. It was embarrassing. So to see Penn State get their act together and win, they deserve a shout out. I don't see Fred the umpire, though, so that's a little concerning.
Oh, man. I remember the first game.
I hope he made it out. I know it's a weekend, but
might have interrupted happy hour. I guess we'll move on here to our next tweet here from Alpha Fire Company in State College, Pennsylvania. Their tweet says, "Working our way down Parkway, we are only one engine company. We have 6 other units out doing the same thing all over the area. Looks like a nasty line of storms went through there. Gosh, what was it? The Tuesday or? Yeah, it was
Monday?
Tuesday, right?
Monday, May 1st.
May 1st. Monday, yeah. And I saw a bunch of video. One of the videos I saw was at the Penn State golf course. I think Nees posted that, and just unbelievable some of the winds that they saw. Mike, you were saying that they had upwards of 60 miles an hour?
Yeah, I think Walker Building there on campus hit 62, and there were some stations in the area that I think gusted over 70 when that came through, so it was pretty impressive.
With storms, you never really know until they're ongoing or afterwards what type of damage they're going to produce. Sometimes they go through and they don't really cause much damage, but this line was certainly of the damage variety. I
think it was the duration too. Some of the videos I saw, I mean, it was 5 to 10 minutes of those winds. It wasn't, a quick hitter. It blew through for quite a while.
I believe Nees said on social media that it was the worst 10 minutes of wind that he's seen in his life.
That's hard to believe. I'm sure he's seen a lot of storms.
Yeah, but yeah, great to see Alpha tweeting this. I love fire companies that are active on social media. So
so that's going to do it for the Twitter section tonight. I actually have a read of the week. It's not don't always have one, but this week there was a blog post that I just couldn't ignore. It's from another guest that we had on, Sean Milrad. He tweeted out, "I wrote this a while ago, but never really advertised it. Today is the day I think mental health and grad school." And he basically just talks about his experiences in grad school and what he went through and some of the help that he needed to get. And then he goes on to talk about early career faculty and some of the relationships that exist there. And there's sometimes need for, intervention when it comes to bullying of younger faculty. So it's a really, really interesting read. I don't know, it takes about like 15, 20 minutes to read. It's pretty long actually. But experience. In the past, I guess, 3 years I've been in grad school, I really learned that mental health is just as important as physical health. It's like going to the gym or going on a jog or something. It's important to stay healthy, not just your body, but your mind too. So I guess advice for new graduates or really anyone, honestly, is make sure your mind's there and make sure they're not just physically. So I will stop preaching. Tyler, let's go into the main topic here.
Yeah, so Michael, we're happy to have you on the show. For our listeners out there, you can find him on Twitter at Michael Spag, I believe. Is that correct?
That'd be correct.
That would be correct. So we want to start off our main segment with a little bit about you. So tell us how you got interested in meteorology, where you're from, where you went to school, and where you are now. Give us a little biographical sketch.
Sure thing. So I grew up in Richmond, Virginia. I've lived in Richmond my whole life. And as long as I could remember, I have been a fan of meteorology and fascinated by the weather. If anything, it was scared of the weather as a kid. And my parents told me since I was 3, I watched the Weather Channel. So I don't really have a set event that, some meteorologists have that was like, I'm going to do weather. But, Hurricane Isabel was a big deal when I was a kid. I mean, that's something I really remember. And, plenty of good storms happened in Virginia during the summertime. So that kind of got me fascinated. And I went to school up in Pennsylvania, went to Penn State, because at the time, there really wasn't a meteorology program in Virginia. Virginia Tech was just kind of getting off the ground. So ended up in State College. And I actually just graduated last December. And I am now living in Tallahassee, Florida. I'm a state meteorologist for Florida Emergency Management. And I'm working in the emergency management field as a meteorologist. And I've been here now 3 months. So I started in February. And hanging down here. And emergency management was something I was doing up at Penn State with the Emergency Management Club. So I was working with Penn State EM. I was running as an EMT with the Penn State Ambulance Service for a couple of years. So I was starting to dabble into emergency management, but when I graduated, I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. I had actually applied to grad school, and that was the plan, to go to grad school until the job popped up over winter break, the start of the new year, and it was something I definitely couldn't turn down because there is not many jobs in emergency management where you are just strictly doing meteorology. There's more meteorologists in emergency management than you think, but whether or not they're doing more of the other side, the other general field of emergency management rather, but there's not many that their sole job in emergency management is to do nothing but focus on the weather. And I got lucky to have one of the jobs down here, so I've been very excited and enjoying it a lot so far.
So how did you sort of merge meteorology and emergency management? Where did that interest in emergency type stuff come from?
Well, my dad has been a firefighter for over 30 years now. He's been a volunteer firefighter since he was 16 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And, that was a big part of my childhood. That was, every weekend we were at the fire station, climbing around the fire trucks. And he also him and the grandfather did some work in the Coast Guard. So I was kind of always around that emergency stuff, the pager going off and scrambling to get up to the fire station. So I was always around that. And I think that's played a big part into my interest. And then when I got to Penn State, I met Tom Bedard, which both of you know very well. And he was like, I'm starting up this emergency management club. It's a growing field of meteorology. And he's like, I'm an EMT. And sure enough, my sophomore year, I was running that club and was taking the EMT course there. So, I had that interest. And then Tom kind of said, hey, I've got these opportunities. And I was kind of unsure of what to do up there. So I kind of picked it up, ran with it, and it ended up working out.
So what would you say is your favorite part of merging these two disciplines together?
Getting double the adrenaline is not only do you have the excitement that, meteorologists get when there's big storms or a hurricane or a severe weather outbreak and you're forecasting it days leading up to it. And, it's ongoing outside at the time. So you get that excitement, and then I'm also getting the excitement of the emergency management field. Being at the state level, it's not so much involved with, local dispatch, but we do have the state dispatch of state resources. So being a part of those emergencies and being involved with the actual aftermath of the storm as well. So that kind of adrenaline and excitement of the event is not only before and during, but it continues afterwards as you continue your involvement with it. And I think that's what's a little bit special about meteorology and emergency management versus maybe doing meteorology anywhere else is you spend most of your time focused on before and during the event. But in emergency management, we spend more time on the recovery aspect of the weather event, more so than preparedness in the action when it's actually ongoing. We still have a lot of resources dedicated to Hermine and Matthew, which happened last year. So, that excitement continues through, and I think that's something I do enjoy about it.
So can you tell us a little bit about your job and sort of how it's laid out and what a typical day might be or what an active day might be?
Yeah, sure. So, you got your blue sky gray days and your gray sky days in emergency management. And, a blue sky day is, going to the watch office and just kind of working at the desk. And it's, like most meteorology jobs, you're going to be working on the computer the whole day. You're going to be doing your forecast products, sending the emails, sending out the forecast, sending out any notifications about stuff coming up. And then, the gray sky days will obviously be vastly different. And as a state meteorologist, which not every state has, Florida has a team of 3. Pennsylvania is brand new with the 1 meteorologist up there. And then Rhode Island actually has one, but I don't really know much about what they're doing. So we have the team of the 3 of us, and there's always one of us there at the watch office. So, Florida's got 67 counties, and they're covered by 7 National Weather Service offices. And while we do spend time forecasting, we spend a lot more time pulling together products from those 7 National Weather Service offices, and then the Hurricane Center, the Storm Prediction Center, the Weather Prediction Center, and then integrating all of those products to be disseminated in a simple, effective way to all of our respective clients that need that in all of those counties and through all the state resources. So a typical day is just going to be making your forecast products, sitting at the desk. And then an active day is when the Emergency Operations Center at the state gets activated, when there's a state of emergency, when there's a significant weather event like a landfalling hurricane, when we turn into a 24-hour operation. And then it's more to decision support in that moment. And we're there for all of the emergency support functions of the Emergency Operations Center. We're there to provide them information. We're literally just sitting at that desk and people come up and answer questions, and that essentially will happen the entire day. We have resources in this location. Where should we move it? Is it safe to set up this shelter here? What's the timing on this event? Is this evacuation look good? Do we need to go farther inland? How is the forecast changing? Which it's a much more high-speed operation, of course, when there's an event happening versus a very casual day sitting at the desk doing your blue sky products.
Now, I assume a lot of your communication is not in person, right? It's over the phone through email?
Correct. Yep. It's through phone and email. And then, when we're actually activating the operations center, it's all verbal. But, we have briefings, webinars, conference calls, and that even happens on a blue sky day. Plenty of that stuff going on, reaching out to the counties. Some of it's over radio, ham radio network with the Hurricane Center and the weather offices. So it's mostly on a blue sky day, it's going to be over the phone and email, but when an event's happening, it's more face-to-face.
So the primary goal is to help people without meteorology knowledge make better decisions and perhaps not make stupid decisions. That's the way I understand it. Yeah,
you can put it that way. Yeah, it's really a way just to make sure everyone's on their game and to provide that support. Because, and I haven't seen how other states do it where they don't have a state meteorologist sitting at the desk in the operations center. So I don't know how it works too much outside of that, because when I was in the operations center here in Florida or at Penn State, I kind of knew how things ran with having the meteorologist there. Yeah, and it's just to have that support. So these people would be making these decisions, but the information they'd be using to make those decisions would likely be secondhand from the Weather Service or from their EM department that's getting sent down from FEMA, and they'd be having to make that on their own. And it just gives them more confidence, and it does result in smarter, better decision making and more efficient, especially when it comes down to the timing of when resources should be moved out and back in. It can kind of speed that up when you have someone giving the information firsthand versus relying on it secondhand, or having to consult the Weather Service while they're also trying to do all of their life-saving operations of watches and warnings. When you can have someone there that's able to disseminate that information on their behalf, it can make things more effective.
So in schooling, when you went to Penn State, you mentioned you took a course, but it seems like the combination of the two fields, meteorology and emergency management, is growing, and maybe it's not to the point where it's fully meshed together. So I'm wondering, I'm sure there were a ton of things that you didn't necessarily know coming into your job that you might need to know in the future or currently. So what were some of those things? What did you learn, and what were some of the skills that you had to kind of pick up on the job?
I guess I'll split that into two things. One being just general emergency management knowledge, because of course I have a meteorology degree, not an emergency management degree. And then second to that, as Tyler can attest to, being in a news station, becoming the resident scientist. I guess I can touch on that one first. Was, on a day-to-day basis, I'm not just forecasting tropical weather or hurricane impact or a severe weather outbreak. I'm also responsible for hydrology and flooding. I'm responsible for fire weather and space weather. And though fire weather and space weather in particular are things that I've been learning over the last couple months, especially with Florida's very active wildfire season. So those are things that I've had to learn the products, learn the terms, learn the forecasting, learn the indexes and things to work with. So learning, and tsunamis is another one. So learning to become competent in all of those things, not just in my severe weather and hurricane forecasting, which is something that, more directly related to your coursework the last couple of years. And then the second one being emergency management. And I had some of that experience working as an EMT. You take your basic incident command system classes, and I had the experience in an EOC, so I just kind of learned on my own how some of that stuff works. But this has sort of been an intro position for me. It's been a good position because when we do have lots of these blue sky days, it gives me a lot of time to do training and coursework, to take actual classroom material for FEMA classes for emergency management operations. And it is a growing field. We have interns a lot through CU here in town, and their meteorology department actually has an emergency management certificate you can get, and a lot of the students that come and work through us have that certificate or in the process of getting it, which includes more of that actual emergency management coursework in the classroom.
Gotcha. And you briefly mentioned it. How important were those kind of extracurricular outside of your classroom experiences at Penn State? And I guess what are some of the options for students now that might not have the coursework there?
I would say it was very important, at least for getting this job right off the bat. Because, if you have, of course, if you've got someone who's might be a great meteorologist, but having someone who's a great meteorologist but understands the needs of the emergency management world obviously makes a difference. So I think it made a big deal. And this is something I think Penn State prepared me very well for, and that was communicating the weather. Just writing those forecast discussions for the Weather Service, the campus Weather Service, those couple times a week makes a big deal, and just making it that much easier for you on a daily basis to write up your brief synopsis of events. So it made me it made me feel a lot more comfortable on that first day being like, okay, we need a write-up of the threat hazards for this week, and we need a forecast discussion for today. And, just being able like, okay, I can do that, and to jump right into that. So they definitely made a big difference. And at a school that doesn't have that emergency management coursework, getting involved with it otherwise through, whether it's the rescue squad or the local fire station, can be enough to open that door into emergency management.
And you certainly have experience as an EMT, correct?
Yes. Yes, I did that for 2 years at Penn State. I took the coursework, which was good to get credit for that. I think I got that to actually count as my general health. So I took that semester where, of course, it was much more an intensive 4-credit class than your gym credits. But I did that and was a volunteer for almost close to a year, and then I was an operations officer for a year for the University Ambulance Service in town, and that was great fun running around on campus and football weekends.
So you've been in the professional career environment for 3 or 4 months now. What's the most surprising thing been for you, comparing real life career to perhaps training days?
Just the intimidation factor, probably, if that's not too cliche of an answer. But when you're sitting in an environment where the information you're providing is resulting in statewide high-level decisions being made at that moment based on what's coming out of your mouth right then and there, is depending on what that governor is deciding to do. It's a very intimidating, and it really, well, you might have been confident going into it that, yeah, I know what this forecast is going to be and I know what the impacts are going to be. But when you get put in that environment where your forecast is going to have direct implications to the response to the entire state, it's definitely intimidating and definitely makes you double check what you're doing and questions, your confidence and making sure that you know what you're doing. So I think that's been one of the biggest differences is, while it was definitely intimidating, you took it serious up at Penn State. When it comes in here, it's just a whole nother level.
So I know you haven't been there long, but I'm wondering if you can forecast where this field is going. What kind of collaboration do you see between emergency management and meteorologists? And I guess maybe what are some of the places that that might be innovative when it comes to fields and really making them kind of work as one unit?
It's been growing, and I think it's, at least on the state level, I can definitely see in the near future more states picking up this position. Maybe not necessarily having a full team, but having someone who can be in that operations center, who can be one hand, especially on states that are covered by several weather service offices or who have significant hazards year round, such as Florida. It can definitely see that growing. And I haven't been in it that long, so I'm not sure too much on how I can see this position growing. Of course, when I get through a hurricane season first, I might have a better way to answer that question. But I see how much, I can't imagine operation centers working without having a meteorologist right then and there to provide that information. So I just see how continuing to have meteorologists on the side of the emergency management will just make things so much more effective, run smoother, run faster. So I guess that's the best I got for that one.
I'm not sure if you know this. I don't know either. But do you know if like the local WFOs, the forecasting offices, have emergency management like people like maybe not one specific meteorologist, but maybe people who have that background that might be like, I don't know, someone that they send to. I'm pretty sure the Sterling office in Maryland or in Virginia does it, but do you know of any other offices that do that kind of thing?
Yes, and we had our hurricane exercise going on this week, and we had meteorologists, almost everyone at the National Weather Service here in Tallahassee got through and was doing briefings and was working with us. Because when you have an event and a full activation, you can't just have one meteorologist cover everything, especially because you still need someone monitoring the day-to-day events that are popping up across the state. So so the states do work very closely with the Weather Service offices, and they do have meteorologists that are sending out the packets to all of the county emergency management directors and the packets to all the state offices. And, there's a big wildfire going on in Southeast Georgia, Northeast Florida. Meteorologist there, I believe he's from Jacksonville, and he's been the incident meteorologist from there that's been running everything with the command center there for that fire, with the Forest Service, with all the state resources that are there. And he's there on a day-to-day basis providing them stuff. So yes, the National Weather Service definitely has people that are designated to do that, and that, all the forecasters there are the ones doing the webinars and sending out the packets of information to a lot of the counties in their region. So
that's awesome.
I couldn't speak to every NWS office, but I know at least a lot of the ones down here in Florida do.
Yeah, that's really great to hear. It's you're in a field where, like, potentially if there was like a terrible disaster, globally or just in the United States, you're in the field where you're a bunch of other people are in charge of a situation that the whole entire looking at and viewing and watching news on, and it's great to hear that. It's not really a question, but it's more of a comment. It's great to hear that there's so much collaboration and efforts to make sure that collaboration is working smoothly. Hopefully we don't have an event like that just remember when Katrina happened. I mean, everyone was just glued to the TV, to papers, to whatever, listening and reading about what was happening. And it's emergency management people and meteorologists who are trying to, make those decisions the best that they can.
Yeah, and emergency management has been changing a lot over the last several years, and especially the last decade or so. And it continues to change with what technology is providing us. And it's something that's going to continue to get better. And unfortunately, it's one of those fields where it's going to take more disasters for us to learn what we need to be doing differently, and how things need to be changed in the days leading up to it, and during and after. But every year and every event gets better and better, and it's going to continue to do so.
So, do you know how long this sort of operation has existed where you are?
Yes, long. I couldn't tell the exact year, but it's been ongoing for 10 or 15 years. In fact, someone from my high school who ran cross country, who my track coach always told me about, had my job 10, 15 years ago now. So at least here in Florida, it has been a pretty long going operation for having a state meteorologist, and then having at least one or two other meteorologists ongoing. And the chief meteorologist here has been here for 10 years now, at least. So she's been here a while. It's been ongoing. It's well integrated into Florida's emergency system. But it's new in places like Pennsylvania, where Jeff Jumper's only been there like a year, 2 years now, a couple years. So
and he's by himself, right?
Yeah, and he exactly, he's by himself too. So I'm not sure how he manages that, because they're not going to have someone there 24/7. So it's, at least here in Florida, it is well into the roots of EM here.
Yeah, I'm obviously from New England, and I have not heard of a state meteorologist or meteorologist that works with emergency management in any of the New England states. I suppose it might exist. I don't think it does, though. I don't think it does in Connecticut.
I think Rhode Island is the state that might have someone, at least part of the time, or part of their duty is solely, they have someone who has meteorology degree of some sort.
So basically, it's a matter of convincing the state to have these separate meteorologists that advise emergency managers, right? I mean, it's different than the Weather Service.
Yeah, it is. And some states it's not as needed, right? If you in New England, or if you get a snowstorm or a significant weather event, at least in New England, that the threat hazards are maybe on a shorter time scale. So if you have a week of a serious event, that's when you can reach out to the National Guard for their meteorologist, or to the National Weather Service to have people coming in and providing that. But in something like Florida where you might have multiple hurricanes during a season, or something where recovery could take months, or you have a couple month-long fire season, you can't really pull every single day detailed resources from things like Weather Service and National Guard that are already doing other things. So having someone that's just dedicated to them is much more reasonable, and it's much easier to persuade the state to have that position.
That's interesting. It is encouraging to see that position in Pennsylvania. We'll have to see what the future holds. Do you have any predictions?
Well, we did. Jeff came down and helped out here. So not only does when there's nothing going on in your state, you're going to be reaching out to the other states in your FEMA region or really across the U.S. I know he came down and helped during Matthew and worked some shifts down here in Florida. So, like I said before, I think some states are going to continue to pick it up, especially ones that have prolonged threat hazards down into the southeast or mid-Atlantic, Midwest kind of deal. Are gonna pick that up. So I see no reason why it's going to continue to grow, because natural disasters are not going to stop anytime soon. That's something that's always going to be going on.
So you mentioned earlier in the show that a lot of the time it's a blue sky day and you're just behind the desk or something. What I know something in the Gulf Coast that has been kind of a topic of discussion, especially in the weather world, is how it hasn't been as active over the last years in terms of landfall compared to the early 2000s where it was just going crazy. What are some of the messages that your team is trying to get out there, and maybe some of the initiatives that your team is doing to make sure people are prepared before something happens?
We do outreach all the time. So that's something that does happen on Blue Sky Days, is just outreach to counties. I've been to some schools already. I'll be going down to a couple of the coastal counties next weekend for some community events. For the typical pamphlets, flyers, outreach, the social media deal on our accounts, pushing that out. And then, last year was definitely a reminder, and something where this year a lot of people are very prepared across Florida coming into this hurricane season because of, almost the entire state saw something last hurricane season. So they're definitely getting ready for it. And nothing was severe enough last season, and everyone kind of got to run through their deal of their whole thing from preparations to recovery. So going into this next season, it's, it had been a couple years. So it was nice. Probably not the best way to put this, but it was nicer last season that the two events we had, thankfully the worst of Matthew stayed off the coast, and Hermine was only a minimal hurricane. So while they were definitely impactful, deadly, caused a lot of damage, it was a reminder of and a way to test through everything again to see how it was going. So that's something we just do on Blue Sky Days is outreach and just working with the public and National Weather Service to just keep all that stuff going with NOAA weather radios and making sure everyone's got their kits and what they should have in their information kits and getting those press releases out and such.
We ask everyone that comes on the show this very question to conclude, and that is, what advice would you have for someone who is interested in or currently studying meteorology, and to add a little flair for you, perhaps with an emergency management mix? What sort of advice would you have for those people?
First, get involved in either taking Fire One or the National Register EMT course. Do something so that you know what it's like to be in a stressful emergency situation where you have to think quick on your feet and work things out. And then two, it's going to get better. Nothing wrong with being in school, but there's nothing like getting paid to do your forecast and to do nothing but track the weather all day. So it's going to get better, and it's going to be awesome.
I love that. Ends on an optimistic note there. Michael, thanks so much for taking some time to talk with us, and best of luck as you enter your first hurricane season here. We'll be thinking about you during that time.
Sure thing. Thank you guys so much for having me. Really enjoyed it.
So if you're not following us on Twitter, you can follow us at the WX Junkies. Give us a like on Facebook as well. You can listen to this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, pretty much any podcast platform. And if you're over there, go ahead and give us a rating/review. I promise we're going to give shout outs to people that have done that already. And everything on the show that we talked about, you can find on our website, theweatherjunkies.com. Tyler, we have an awesome May planned. Give us a little taste of that.
Next week, we have Carrie and Caitlin from Bugs and Stuff. Excited to have them on the show. On the following week, which will be the third week of May, we have Garrett Argianis on the show. He is a friend of mine and a forensic meteorologist, also a broadcast meteorologist. So we'll do a lot of talking about forensic meteorology, something that we haven't explored too much yet on this podcast. And then on the final week of the month, the final podcast, May 25th, we have Greta Shum from Climate Central. So the entire month is planned, and we are excited to move forward. We certainly hope you enjoyed this week's episode with Michael and the Emergency Management Chat. So on behalf of Michael, Dakota, and myself, thank you for listening, and we certainly hope that you'll join us right back here next week.